What if I told you reggae wasn't born in peace and love, but in fear, blood, and surveillance? Before streaming turned rebellion into a playlist mood, before One Love became background music at the mall. There was a sound built inside crowded Kingston yards with no electricity, no safety, and no future promised. That sound was roots reggae, and the people who built it weren't trying to entertain the world. They were trying to survive it. This is not the pretty version you've heard. This is the real story, because roots reggae didn't just give us bass lines and smoke and posters of a smiling Rasta. It gave the poor a weapon. It said out loud what governments, police, even radio tried to keep quiet. It said Babylon on record. It called out corruption by name. It told black people across the world, you are royalty, not property. But here's the problem. The same system reggae was fighting learned how to sell reggae. So tonight we're going to ask a simple question. Was reggae music, or was reggae an uprising? To answer that, we have to go back before Bob Marley is a mural, before the posters, before the t-shirts, before don't worry about a thing. Back to a Jamaica that had just broken from the British flag, but not from British reality. A Jamaica where the streets were flooding with unemployed youth, gunmen tied to political parties, U.S. eyes watching, and a new faith called Rastafari, telling those youth, you are not slaves, you are lions. In that world, music was not a hobby. Music was the news. Music was warning. Music was identity. This is where the beat changes from ska to rocksteady to reggae. This is where Haile Selassie becomes more than a man. He becomes proof that black kings exist in real life. This is where Babylon becomes the word you whisper when the police truck turns the corner. And this is where the first wave of roots artists, the Wailers, Burning Spear, Culture, Peter Tosh, stop making dance tunes and start making messages, not party songs, survival songs. But here's the part almost nobody tells you. Speaking that truth carried a price. You could be pulled off the street. You could be banned from airplay. You could be beaten. You could be shot. In December 1976, gunmen walked into Bob Marley's home and opened fire days before he was supposed to play a show meant to calm down a country that was almost in civil war. He took a bullet. His wife took a bullet. His manager took a bullet. He still walked on stage. Why? Fame, ego, or because by that point reggae wasn't just his career, it was his duty? That's the part the world forgets. We turned the rebel into a logo. We turned protest into lifestyle branding. So let's be clear. Roots reggae is not soft. Roots reggae is not background. Roots reggae is not island vibes. Roots reggae is testimony. It is witness. It is accusation. Beat, third nudge, pull viewer forward. And if you think this is just a 1970s Jamaica story, stay with this, because that same sound was recorded in tiny rooms with broken gear, will break out and infect London punk, Bronx hip-hop block parties, African independence movements, and even modern protest music today. The same Babylon those singers were calling out in Kingston, people in London, Lagos, New York, Johannesburg, Brixton police stations, they heard that word and said, yeah, we know that system too. So the question becomes bigger. How did music from one island end up arming voices all over the world? Who helped it spread? Who tried to stop it? Who cashed in on it? And who paid for it with their life? This is roots, reggae, rebellion. This is the untold timeline from shacks and sound systems to bullets and exile to global myth. If you think you know reggae, let's test that. Because after you hear what really happened, you will never hear One Love the same way again.
All right, C-Trends fam, let's keep it real. We're pouring our hearts into bringing you the best celebrity news and music deep dives. But check it. A massive 98% of you aren't subscribed yet. Subscribing is how you can truly support us, helping us grow and create even better content. If you're vibing with what we do, Take a sec to hit that subscribe button. It's free and makes a huge difference. Plus, ring that notification bell so you never miss out. Let's flip that 98% and build this C Trends family together. Your support is everything.
Why did music from one small island become the sound of resistance for people who had never even seen that island? To understand that, we have to go back to Jamaica in the late 1960s and early 1970s. On paper, the country was free. Jamaica had just become independent from Britain in 1962. That flag change mattered. It was pride. It was headline history. But daily life for most poor black Jamaicans didn't actually feel free. Kingston was crowded, violent, and tense. Whole families shared one small room. Work was hard to find. The people in the poorest areas, Trenchtown, Tivoli, Jungle, were living inside a pressure cooker. Police watched them. Politicians used them. Outside, money moved in and out, and radio mostly played clean, imported music that did not speak for them. Nobody up top was telling their story honestly. Pause on that, because that's where reggae comes from. In this moment, the sound of Jamaica is already changing. Ska, fast, upbeat, horn-driven party music from the early 60s had slowed down into rocksteady, which carried more soul and heartbreak. The drums relaxed. The bass got heavier. The groove started to lean back instead of rush forward. But even then, a lot of songs were still romance, heartbreak, dance tunes. Then something happens. The music stops talking only about love and starts talking about survival. That shift is the birth of reggae. Now listen carefully, because this part matters for the rest of the film. When we say roots, we're not just talking about a style of production or a warm analog sound. Roots means truth. It means identity. It means memory. Roots is music that says, this is who we are. This is where we come from. This is what was done to us. This is what we refuse to accept anymore. Reggae is the beat, the one-drop drum pattern, the heavy bass line carrying the emotional weight, the offbeat guitar chop that feels like a heartbeat under pressure. It's the physical vehicle, and rebellion is the mission. Roots, reggae, rebellion, spirit, sound, purpose. This is not marketing language. This is real. This is how people were communicating with each other when normal systems failed them. Because here's the situation in Jamaica at that time. The poor are being pushed into tighter spaces. The police are not seen as protectors. Politicians are building little armies in the neighborhoods. Guns are flowing. Foreign interests are watching the island and picking sides. And young black men are being told they're criminals before they're even 18. In that world, music wasn't just music anymore. Music became a message board. Music became warning. Music became therapy. Music became education. Music became prophecy. This is where reggae turns from sound into weapon. We start to hear words like Babylon. In reggae language, Babylon doesn't just mean the ancient city in the Bible. Babylon means the corrupt system, government abuse, colonial leftovers, police harassment, Western control, business deals that keep poor people poor. Babylon is anything designed to keep you on your knees, and suddenly, regular kids from the ghettos of Kingston are pressing records that say out loud on vinyl, Babylon is the enemy. That is not small. That is not safe. Now, here's the part that makes reggae different from a lot of other genres of that same era. In London in the 70s, punk bands were screaming that the system was broken. In New York, early hip-hop block parties were starting to give the Bronx a voice the newspapers would not give them, but reggae in Kingston took it one step further. It didn't just attack the system, it named the system, and then it offered an alternative. That alternative was Rastafari. Rastafari in this period is not a fashion, not a costume. It is a worldview. It says, We are descendants of Africa, not property of empire. We answer to a higher law than Babylon. We live clean. We reject the lies we were taught about ourselves. We recognize black royalty and black divinity in real time, not as a fantasy, and we are not afraid to say it. So when you hear roots reggae, you are hearing Rasta ideas put inside music form. Fear Babylon, return to truth, stand up, know yourself, don't wait for permission. That right there is explosive in a young country still figuring out who owns power. And this is where reggae becomes more than rhythm. This is where it becomes dangerous, because once you tell the people who feel invisible, you are not invisible. We are done. You create movement. Now the tempo drops, the bass is huge, the drums leave space so every lyric lands like a punch. The voice is not singing, "Baby, I miss you." The voice is singing, "Get up, stand up." That is a completely different job for a song. Pause here and imagine what that felt like in real time. You're 19, you live in a part of town the cops call bad. You're tired of being searched, disrespected, pushed. On the little local station late at night, you hear a singer say the thing you are not allowed to say to a police officer's face. That's electricity, that's oxygen, that's weapon, and reggae becomes the carrier. Now, every 60 to 90 seconds in this story, the energy shifts again, because as soon as reggae starts talking about Babylon, Babylon starts paying attention. Politicians start to worry about who's controlling the youth. Police start to see singers as agitators, not entertainers. Radio starts deciding who will and will not be heard, and global labels, especially British and American labels, start circling around Jamaica looking for who they can market, who they can clean up, who they can export. So the music that was built to free poor people's minds is now being watched, pressured, shaped, and in some cases shot at. This is not theory. This got physical. By the mid-1970s, Jamaica is on edge. Street clashes, political violence, gangs tied to party leaders. It's not just lyrics anymore. It's survival. You see artists walking with real fear in their lives. You see pressure on anyone who can gather a crowd with a microphone. You even see open assassination attempts on major reggae voices. And yet, even under that, the message keeps getting louder. That is the story we're about to go into for the rest of this film. We're going to talk about British rule and how that shaped Jamaica's poverty even after the flag changed. We're going to talk about sound system culture, giant homemade speakers rolling into an empty lot and turning that lot into a public courtroom for the neighborhood. We're going to talk about Rastafari versus Babylon, and why that wasn't just religion, it was psychological warfare. We're going to talk about the night gunman walked into Bob Marley's house in 1976 and opened fire. We're going to talk about how reggae left the island and turned into a worldwide rebellion anthem. And we're going to ask the question nobody in power wanted people in the ghettos to ask. Was reggae just music, or was reggae a weapon that taught the world how to say no? Keep that question in your head, because in the next chapter, you're going to see where that weapon was forged. Reggae didn't fall out of the sky. It wasn't some record label experiment. It wasn't invented in a clean studio with good air conditioning. It was built piece by piece by people who had been pushed to the edge for generations. And before we talk about reggae, we have to talk about the people who made it and what made them, because by the time the world even heard the word reggae, the pieces were already deadly. Shift 1, the island that taught rebellion. Let's start at the root. Jamaica was not just a Caribbean vacation island. For most of its history, it was a British sugar machine, one of the most profitable colonies in the British Empire, powered by enslaved African labor on brutal plantations. Enslaved people were forced to work, punished, sold, and treated as property. That went on for generations. Britain did not free these people out of kindness. Slavery in Jamaica only ended in stages between 1834 and 1838, and even then, freedom came with nothing. no land, no wealth, no support. The same families who had owned the land kept the land. The same people who had worked the land were told to figure it out. That wound, that anger did not disappear. It stayed in memory. It stayed in stories. It showed up in how people saw authority. So long before reggae, the first ingredient was already there. Distrust of Babylon. Not Babylon like in a Bible lesson. Babylon meaning the system that owns your body, writes your laws, and dares to tell you that you should be grateful. If you don't understand that, you don't understand why reggae sounds like it's talking to power instead of bowing to it. Shift to church, drum, and survival. Now we bring in the next piece, spirit. After slavery, the African descendants in Jamaica built two musical lives at once. On one side, church, revival meetings, call and response singing, hymns about pain, struggle, and redemption. People used gospel language to process trauma and demand justice from above. On the other side, Africa never left. The drums never left. Nyabingi drumming, deep, pulsing, heartbeat-style ritual drumming tied to Rastafari carried the old African rhythm forward. It sounded like memory. It sounded like resistance. It wasn't just music. It was prayer and defiance at the same time. And there was mento. Mento was Jamaica's own folk street music, acoustic guitars, banjo, Roomba box, storytelling lyrics about daily life, work, poverty, sex, power. It was local truth music, not imported music. It said, this is what's really happening in the yard. Put those three together, white church vocals, African drum language, and mento storytelling, and you're starting to feel the early DNA of roots reggae. Suffering is not silence. Suffering has a beat. Suffering talks back. Notice something important. Nobody from a big record company taught them this. This was community-built sound. Shift 3, Kingston, 1950s, 1960s. Now we move into the streets. By the 1950s and 1960s, Jamaica is taking a new shape. On paper, independence is coming. Jamaica becomes independent from Britain in 1962, and people are being told, you're in control now. Your future is yours. But if you walk through West Kingston during those years, it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like overcrowding. Whole families are living in what people call yards, shared spaces, patched roofs, shaky electricity, no real safety. Jobs are scarce. Education opportunities are narrow. Police presence is heavy. Politicians are starting to build little loyal crews in every neighborhood. Young men are being pulled, recruited, weaponized. It's tense. It's hot. It's watched. And here's the key part. Radio is not built for these people. What's playing on official Jamaican radio then is often American R&B, soul, crooner music, calypso. Music that sounds good, yes, but it doesn't sound like their block, their life, their anger. It sounds imported. It sounds safe. So what do? They build their own broadcast system. They build sound systems. Shift 4, sound system culture. Sound system culture is one of the purest do-it-yourself-or-die inventions in music history. Here's how it worked. Someone in the neighborhood would invest in giant homemade speakers, amps, turntables, and a generator. Then they would drag that whole setup into an empty lot or a street corner at night. They'd wire it, power it, and turn it up so loud you could feel the bass in your chest half a block away. That wasn't just a party, that was a public service. You didn't need a radio license. You didn't need BBC approval. You didn't need some rich man's nightclub. Sound systems turned the street into the club, the newsfeed, and the parliament. Selectors WC Ital, the people choosing and spinning the records, battled each other to play the rarest cuts, the most exclusive versions, the most powerful rhythms. They weren't just DJs, they were informers, narrators, hype men, sometimes even peacemakers. This is important. This is where people first heard themselves reflected back. If you grew up in West Kingston and the radio didn't speak for you, the sound system did. If you had something to say and no microphone, you grabbed the sound system mic. If the police tried to shut you down, the whole block saw it. This is where young singers and toasters Early MCs touched music for real for the first time, not in a clean studio but a yard in front of neighbors at 2 in the morning on a homemade PA that could blow at any second. That is the first record deal for a lot of future reggae voices, a neighborhood crowd, a live mic, and the courage to hold it. Shift 5, Ska Rocksteady. Now we hit the next mutation, the sound itself. Before reggae, Jamaica ran through two huge styles, ska and rocksteady. Ska, early 1960s, fast, upbeat, horn-driven, lots of swing. It mixed American jazz and R&B influences with local rhythm. You could dance to it easy. It felt proud. It felt like we're here now. Ska was independence energy, loud, bright, forward. Then by the mid-1960s, ska slows down. It cools into something called rocksteady. Rocksteady takes the horns out of the center and hands control to the bass line. The vocals get more soulful. The groove leans back instead of racing forward. The lyrics start to sound less like party anthems and more like emotional testimony, heartbreak, struggle, survival. Rocksteady is important because it teaches Jamaica two things. One, the bass can be the lead instrument. 2, emotion can sit in the voice like a warning. That bass-led, slower groove, that's the doorway reggae is about to walk through. Because once the bass becomes the heartbeat, and once the singer starts telling the truth, you are inches away from what we will soon call roots reggae. Shift 6, the pieces come together. So let's connect it all like we're building a person. Early life, background, Jamaica, post-slavery, post-empire, promised freedom but still living under poverty, street violence, and imported control. Early influences, church gospel and revival chants, Nyabingi drums that carry Africa forward in the open, Mento storytelling that says, we live like this and you can't silence it. First real contact with music, not a fancy label meeting, not a corporate showcase. A sound system in an empty yard with homemade speakers, with real people watching in real time. That's where future singers, DJs, and producers learn pressure, presence, and message. The sound right before reggae, ska's celebration, rocksteady slowdown, bass getting heavier, lyrics getting braver, the beat starting to talk instead of just dance. When you put all of that together, reggae is not an accident. Reggae is the next stage of evolution. Reggae is the child born from chains, church, and street science. And that's why when reggae finally hits, it doesn't sound unsure. It sounds fully formed. It sounds like a verdict. That's why when people first heard roots reggae, it already felt like a message from a prophet, not a demo from a new act. Because by the time the word reggae shows up on a record label, the mindset, the anger, the rhythm, the courage, and the target were already in place. Curiosity, gap, handoff. Here's where we go next. We've built the body, now we're going to watch it stand up. In the next chapter, reggae stops being almost there and becomes its own name, its own rhythm, its own open threat. We're going to see how the beat changed. We're going to see who named it, and we're going to see why that moment scared the people in charge. Because after this point, it's no longer islands and sunshine, it's get up, stand up, and Babylon is listening. After years of yard parties, church echoes, and slow-burning anger, the pieces finally locked in. It didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened in small, hot rooms where the air smelled like dust, solder, and sweat. Turntables humming, tape rolling, a bass line being tuned and tuned again until the floorboards shook. And then in 1968, a name slipped out of a singer's mouth and stuck to the new beat like fire to dry grass. Do the reggae. Toots and the Maytals weren't workshopping a brand. They were catching a street word and pinning it to a rhythm. The island was already learning to breathe. In that moment, the room went quiet. Because this didn't sound like a new act. It sounded like a weapon. Shift 1, the slowdown. Right before this, ska had been the heartbeat of independence, fast horns, bright upstrokes, a sprint. But you can't sprint forever. By the mid-60s, ska cools into rocksteady, fewer horns, more space, vocals leaning into soul, the bass getting bold. The island's mood is changing, and so is the clock inside the music. Now listen for the exact click. The tempo drops from dancehall rush to street sway. The guitar stops chattering and starts chopping on the offbeat, the skank that turns the air between notes into part of the rhythm. The bass steps out from the back line and takes the lead, thick, melodic, moral. And the drums discover a new kind of silence, the one drop, kick and rim landing together, the snare ghosting the downbeat so the absence it hits like a presence. That space is not empty, that space is tension. It's the sound of a city holding its breath. In those inches of silence between beats, the lyrics have room to speak plainly. No more coded party talk, real talk, survival talk. Shift 2, the room where it turned. Imagine Studio 1 on a late night, producer Coxone Dodd at the board, calm, careful, with that ruthless ear for what moves a yard dance. A singer steps up, not crooning romance, but reporting the day. Police raids, hunger, a landlord with no mercy. The bassist, steady as a heartbeat, carries the whole story in 8 slow notes. The drummer leaves a hole where you expect a crack, and in that hole, the truth lands. Someone in the control room leans in and says nothing, because everybody hears it at the same time. Oh, this is different. This is not Baby Please. This is Babylon. Listen, across town, another lab is humming. Lee, Scratch Perry, all nerves and vision, is carving space into the tape itself. Echo as a political act, spring reverb like rain on zinc roofs. Drop the vocal for a bar so your brain fills it in with the faces you just saw on the way to the studio. Bring the bass up until it's not an instrument anymore, it's an argument. A regular song asks you to dance. These new sides are asking you to choose a side. Shift 3, the first spark you could name now. Come back to Toots. Do the reggae. It wasn't the first time the syllables were floating around Kingston, but it was the first time a national audience heard the word land on vinyl with authority. The label ink dries, the stampers press, the sound systems arm themselves, and a nickname becomes a flag, reggae, and with a name comes a dare, define me. Immediately, the street accepts the challenge. Reggae doesn't slow down because it's tired. It slows down because it's heavy. It carries something. It needs room for big words to sit. Dignity, justice, Africa, Babylon. It needs room for the witness voice, calm and furious at the same time, to stand in the middle of the track and point. You can hear the mission changing in real time. Singers who cut their teeth on love songs are now writing dispatches. Choruses become slogans you can chant at a corner meeting. Verses become testimonies you could swear on in court. This is the first spark, the moment the beat stops selling the night and starts defending the day. Shift 4, the Wailers step through the door. Around 1970-71, the Wailers walk into the upsetter orbit. Lee Perry on the console, the Barrett brothers, Family Man on bass, Carlton on drums, lock in a groove that feels like a march and a prayer at the same time. Listen to how the one drop under Carlton sticks turns anger into discipline, how Family Man's bass lines argue point by point without ever raising their voice. Songs that would have been simple in another era now sound like courtroom exhibits. Small Axe doesn't beg a giant to be kind, it promises a sharp blade. Duppy Conqueror doesn't fear superstition, it boasts a victory over it. Why did it click immediately? Because the city needed it to, because there was a hole in public life where honesty should be, and these records plugged the hole, because 1,000 young listeners who didn't exist to the people in charge suddenly heard themselves leading. Shift 5, the sound world widens. Reggae is not just songs, it's an atmosphere. Producers turn the studio into a fourth instrument. Coxsone Dodd builds lineages, house bands whose muscle memory becomes Jamaica's muscle memory, Scratch Perry weaponizes texture, tape slap like a siren, reverb like the inside of a church, percussion that sounds found because it is. Engineers and selectors invent the idea version, flip the record, strip the vocal, ride the rhythm, let the DJ toast the street news on top. Now the music is not fixed, it's alive. Tonight's version is not last week's. Tonight's truth might not be tomorrow's. And on every corner where a sound system sets up, you don't need a subscription, a license, or permission. You just need ears. That's why people start saying, you don't read the paper, you listen to the record. It's not a cliche, it's logistics. Records are cheaper than newspapers in some neighborhoods and more trusted in most. Shift 6, lyrics without a hideout. Here's the other thing that happens when you slow the beat and thicken the bass. The words have nowhere to hide. If you lie, the silence exposes you. If you boast, the drum asks for receipts. So writers sharpen up, the topics shift hard. Daily survival, rude boy life and consequences, police harassment and political gunmen, black pride that is not theoretical, names, dates, ancestors, the right to eat, the right to work, the right to breathe. Every chorus feels like it was written on a wall first. Every verse sounds like somebody's older cousin told it to you on a stoop at midnight. Shift 7, the room goes quiet again. Picture a cramped studio in downtown Kingston, 1971. A singer finishes a take. No histrionics, no studio tricks. Just a sturdy melody, riding a bass line that could carry a building. The engineer fingers the echo send and lets the last words spill into the future. Silence. In that half second, nobody moves because what just came through the speakers didn't feel like entertainment. It felt like an address to the nation. That's the moment producers chase for the next decade. That's the moment selectors want to drop at 2:15 a.m. when the dance is hot and the cops are circling. That's the moment when the crowd stops shouting and just listens. Resolution, the new common tongue. By the end of this stretch, 1968 to about 1972, the vocabulary is set. The one drop is a language. The skank is punctuation. The bass is the narrator. The studio is the courtroom. And reggae is not just a tag, it's a warning label. Most importantly, the purpose is undeniable. Reggae gave voice to the ghetto in the ghetto's own language. It took private anger and turned it into public speech. It took local pain and tuned it for export. It took a beat and handed it a badge. And once a beat wears a badge, you can't dance around what it's there to do. Curiosity gap, but where did that badge get its authority? Why did the lyrics sound like scripture and the drum like a ceremony? In the next chapter, we open the door that explains everything the politicians couldn't control. Rastafari, how a faith, a drum circle, and a living symbol of black royalty gave reggae its oath, its courage, and its target. After you hear that, you'll understand why the music didn't just speak truth, it swore to it. In the early 1970s, reggae arrived for real, not the tourist version, not the island vibes version, the dangerous version. This is the point of the story where the music stops being just rhythm and turns into open rebellion, and the match that lights it is Rastafari, because Rastafari wasn't just a hairstyle or weed smoke or a poster on a college wall. Rastafari was a worldview, a full system, and when that worldview plugged into the new reggae beat, everything detonated. Fans got it immediately. Authorities understood the danger. Critics in Jamaica, in London, in America said it was too radical, too political, too dirty, too confrontational, not real music. That tension is the rise. Shift 1, the crown that proved a prophecy. To understand why Rastafari hit so hard, you have to understand what it gave people who had been told for generations that they were nothing. In 1930, an Ethiopian ruler named Tafari Makonnen was crowned Emperor Haile Selassie I in Addis Ababa. He took titles like King of Kings, Conquering Lion of the Tribe of Judah, and he stood on an African throne, not a European one. Many black Jamaicans, especially among the poor, looked at that moment and said, "That's it. That's the sign. That is a black king alive right now, not in a book, not in a dream." From that point, a movement in Jamaica began saying, Haile Selassie isn't just a world leader, he's chosen, he's divine presence, proof that black people are royalty, not property. Encyclopedia Britannica, some called him the second coming, some called him the living God. Others later on said, no, not God, but a messenger, a sign, a carrier of truth. Either way, the effect on the street was the same. If a black emperor could sit on a throne in Africa and stare down Western empires, including Italy, which tried to invade Ethiopia in the 1930s, then don't tell me I'm worthless. Don't tell me I'm supposed to bow. Don't tell me this is just how it is. That belief system is Rastafari, and once that belief system met reggae, reggae stopped asking for respect. It started demanding it. Shift 2, Babylon versus Zion. Rastafari gave reggae its language. Two words matter more than almost any others: Babylon and Zion. Babylon in Rasta speech is not about ancient ruins. Babylon means the system that keeps you in chains. Colonial rule, corrupt politicians, violent police, global money that keeps poor black people trapped at the bottom no matter who is technically in charge. After independence, you hear Babylon in the lyrics and you know exactly who's being called out. It's not a mystery target. It's the government. It's the police. It's the party boss who hands out guns in your neighborhood before elections. It's the foreign loan office that says stability but means stay down. Then there's Zion. Zion, in Rasta thought, is the opposite of Babylon. It's freedom, it's dignity, it's justice, it's the promised home. A lot of Rasta voices point to Africa, especially Ethiopia, as Zion, the place of return, mentally or physically, where black people live on their own terms and answer to no colonizer. So when reggae singers say Babylon, they're naming the pain. When they say Zion, they're naming the cure. And now think about what that sounds like on a record in a place like 1970s Kingston, where police are already suspicious of you just for how you look. This is not Baby, I Love You. This is We See You, Babylon. This is We're Going Home, Zion. That's a different level of threat. Shift 3, Lifestyle as Resistance. Here's what scared the mainstream even more. Rastafari wasn't just lyrics, it was daily behavior. Rastas talked about Ital living, natural food, clean living, staying close to the earth, rejecting processed, polluted systems. They wore dreadlocks, which were not a style choice in that moment so much as a rejection of European standards of respectable grooming. Dreadlocks said, "I will not shape myself to make Babylon comfortable." They used ganja, cannabis, as a sacrament, not as a party drug, a holy plant that, in their view, opened the mind, calmed rage, and brought them closer to Jah, God. This put them in direct conflict with Jamaican law and police, who already profiled them as problem people and used marijuana possession as an excuse to raid, beat, and jail them. Put simply, the look, the food, the prayer, the smoke, the drum, it was all protest to older, respectable society, church elders, politicians, wealthy Jamaicans trying to court foreign investors. Rastas looked like trouble. Too dirty, too loud, too high, too defiant. Not real citizens. To the youth who felt shut out of that same respectable Jamaica, the Rasta was proof that you could live without begging the system to like you. That gap, disgust from the top, love from the bottom, is exactly the same gap you see in how critics versus fans reacted to early roots reggae. Shift 4, when the message hit, wax. Now watch what happens when this fire steps into the studio. The Wailers aren't just singing love songs anymore. Burning Spear is not here to comfort Babylon. Culture isn't writing background music. Peter Tosh is openly calling out police, colonial thinking, and spiritual cowardice. Roots harmony groups like the Gladiators are delivering street prophecy in calm, steady voices. They're not acting like entertainers, they're acting like witnesses. This is the first major stage moment, reggae as testimony. When these artists press records, it's not just, here's a new single, it's, here's the statement, here's the charge sheet, here's the sermon. A song like Slave Driver from Bob Marley and the Wailers in the early 70s is not talking about heartbreak. It is directly accusing the legacy of slavery and flipping the power dynamic. The table is turned. That is courtroom language on vinyl for young listeners in Kingston, in Brixton, in Brooklyn, in Lagos. The effect is instant. This is the first time in their lives that a popular record is saying exactly what they feel about oppression. Not in polite code, not in safe metaphors, but directly. Fans hear these lyrics and feel seen. Authority hears these lyrics and feels watched. Now the press starts paying attention, not always with respect. The mainstream reaction in Jamaica and overseas is mixed. Some journalists and radio voices talk about reggae as revolutionary street poetry, and they mean it with fear. Others dismiss it as slum music, weed music, backward thinking, or racial anger disguised as religion. You can feel the discomfort. This isn't how pop is supposed to behave. Pop is supposed to entertain, not accuse. Meanwhile, crowds at sound system sessions are losing their minds, chanting down Babylon like it's a live rally. The split is wide now. On one side, too political, too aggressive, not music. On the other side, finally somebody said it. Shift 5. The fear factor. By the mid-1970s, reggae with open Rasta content is no longer just music, it's movement culture, and that scares people. It scares local politicians, because now every ghetto youth with a speaker and a pressing can become a voice of opposition. It scares police because the songs are calling them Babylon agents to their face. It scares foreign powers watching Jamaica in the Cold War era because any music that links poor black anger to African pride, Pan-African return, and anti-colonial language can spread fast and not just inside Jamaica. And yes, it scares the traditional music industry because you can't control a singer who believes his message comes from Jah, not from you. If I'm a label exec in London in 1973, that's a nightmare and a goldmine. I can sell that voice, but I cannot tame it. Resolution. When reggae stopped being entertainment, here's the point where everything changes. Rastafari gives reggae its backbone. Haile Selassie becomes proof of black royalty and global black dignity. Babylon becomes the enemy you can name out loud. Cops, parties, banks, empires. Zion becomes the promised future. Africa, Ethiopia, self-rule, freedom. Ital living, dreadlocks, and ganja become daily resistance, not style. And reggae becomes the broadcast. By the time roots reggae is fully formed, you cannot separate the music from the faith. Roots reggae is Rasta on record. The Wailers, Burning Spear, Culture, the Gladiators, Peter Tosh, they're not just performers, they're carriers of message. They're saying, we are not slaves anymore, and they mean right now, not in theory. That's why older voices in power called it dangerous. That's why young people called it truth. That is detonation, curiosity gap, but there is a cost to speaking this loud. Once reggae starts calling out Babylon by name, Babylon answers back. In the next chapter, we move into the street war, political violence in Jamaica, gunmen tied to parties, the 1976 attack on Bob Marley's home, and how the music that preached unity got pulled straight into real bullets. This is where the rebellion stops being metaphor. This is where people bleed for the sound. They weren't just selling music, they were selling a way to live. For fans, roots reggae felt like permission. For the industry, it felt like a problem. Act 1, Detonation. In 1972, the fuse reached the powder. The Wailers signed with Island Records and walked into international studios like soldiers disguised as a band. Chris Blackwell didn't market them as a Caribbean novelty. He framed them like a rock act. Serious jackets, album art with teeth, tours aimed straight at London and the U.S. The result, Catch a Fire 1973 and Burnin' 1973. Those weren't records. You could argue they were indictments. Get Up, Stand Up doesn't flirt. It commands. I Shot the Sheriff doesn't ask for sympathy. It reverses the gaze. Fans understood immediately. The bass felt like a spine. The drum, a heartbeat under pressure. The lyrics, calm and furious, and that calm fury spread. The first time some rock writers heard it, they sneered. Too repetitive, too political, not real music. Meanwhile, in clubs and college halls, kids who had never set foot in Kingston stood frozen, then erupted because it didn't sound like a new act. It sounded like a verdict. This is where the myth engine switches on. The image wasn't a costume. Dreadlocks weren't fashion. They were refusal. Red, gold, green wasn't a palette. It was a passport. Knitted tams, army jackets, denim worn to the bone. Ital life preached in interviews and lived after sound check. The message reached beyond songs. Eat clean, think free, fight Babylon without asking its permission. To the faithful, it was oxygen. To the fearful, it looked like trouble arriving on time. Act 2. Controversy writes the script. The more direct the message, the louder the backlash. Rasta on wax meant police attention in the streets. Ganja as sacrament meant raids and headlines. Some stations clipped or refused songs that named Babylon too clearly. Peter Tosh turned the pressure into policy. Legalize it wasn't a slogan, it was a dare, and the pushback made him larger, not smaller. The Wailers themselves were no tabloid, tidy story, internal riffs, business arguments, the grind of being prophets, asked to tour like pop stars. And then, December 1976, gunmen entered Bob Marley's home days before the Smile Jamaica concert. Bullets flew. Marley, Rita, and their manager were wounded. 2 nights later, he limped on stage anyway, shirt open, bandaged, defiant. That's when myth overtook marketing. The world didn't just hear the rebel, they saw the cost. From that night forward, the image hardened. Marley as the unkillable messenger. Tosh as the uncompromising prosecutor. Bunny Wailer as the spiritual witness. Burning Spear as the historian priest. Marcus Garvey, 1975, teaching Pan-African memory on vinyl. Harmony groups like Culture tuned prophecy to a chorus. Their warning would crest a year later with 2/7's clash, a date that made everyday Jamaicans reconsider leaving their houses. Whether you believe the prophecy or not, you felt its weight. Critics versus fans. That tension sharpened the blade. The respectable press sniffed. Monotone, militant, mystical nonsense, too dirty, street music. The crowd answered with ticket stubs, rewound cassettes, and a new vocabulary. Babylon, I, Zion, Irie. The words migrated into dorm rooms and union halls, punk basements and youth clubs. If language shapes reality, Roots Reggae was busy redrafting the map. And the look traveled too. Dreads on kids who'd never met a Rasta. Army coats and gray English winters. Red, gold, green stitched onto jackets in Bronx schoolyards. Posters of the Lion of Judah beside Clash flyers. You could hear it in punk bass lines, in post-punk dub experiments, in Two Tones ska revival, in DJ Patter sliding into early hip-hop. The beat that began as local witness was now global grammar. Act 3, larger than life and larger than industry. The industry tried to bottle it, gloss the edges, sand the sermons, package the rebel for safe shelves, but Roots Reggae didn't behave. Studio magicians like Lee Scratch Perry built echo chambers where drums sounded like marching feet and voices came back from the future. Sound systems minted folk heroes without asking radio for a blessing. Coxsone Dodd's schools of players turned sessions into living textbooks. Each cut felt like another page in the same long book of survival labels. Loved the demand, hated the control it gave to the street. Governments loved the calm when the song soothed, hated the fire when the songs named names. Church elders loved the Bible language, hated how Rasta reread it with Africa at the center. And that contradiction, the world buying the poster while fearing the person, made the figures mythic. They weren't just performers, they were symbols that would not stay inside the frame. So by the end of 1976, Roots Reggae is at full spiritual and political power. The sound is slower, heavier, prophetic. The image is devotion as defiance. The scandals, raids, bans, bullets are proof the message is landing. The influence is everywhere. Punk, post-punk, two-tone, early hip-hop, and the vocabulary of resistance has a backbeat the world can chant. Resolution, but not relief. The explosion crowned heroes and painted targets on their backs. The music made millions feel seen and made powerful people feel seen too. Curiosity Gap, here's the contradiction we can't ignore. When the soundtrack of rebellion gets this loud, rebellion doesn't stay on records. In the next chapter, we step into the street, party guns, party politics, Kingston on edge, and the night music and power had a face-to-face that no lyric could soften. This is where the myth meets the muzzle. This is where the beat has to survive bullets.
This video is sponsored by the Lore Store on Amazon, your one-stop shop for music lovers across reggae, rock, pop, and hip-hop. We built it for real listeners who don't want to dig through 1,000 listings to find the right gear. Inside the Lore Store, you'll find 5 aisles. VIP, top, battle-tested essentials, headphones, turntables, speakers, gig-safe earplugs, smart speakers. Reggae Vibe, Roots and Lovers. Rock Made Easy, automatic decks, warm bookshelf speakers, vinyl care. Rock Lore, classic rock must-haves, open back cans, simple amps, living room concert vibes. Pop Lore, feel-good everyday setups, clean, clear speakers, easy streaming, nostalgia-friendly picks. Hip-hop must-haves, punchy bass without the muddle, closed-back headphones and living room systems that handle low-end, plus a rotating crate of old album vinyl if you're rebuilding a 60s-90s collection. Every product page tells you who it's for, 3 pros, 1 con, and why we picked it. So you can choose with confidence. Flying soon? Check. VIP for noise canceling that tames plane roar. Mostly listening at home? Try open back headphones that let live albums breathe. Want instant gratification vinyl? Our fully automatic turntable is 1 button from silence to music, and the record cleaning kit knocks down crackle so the bass tightens up. Headed to shows? Grab high-fidelity earplugs. Hands-free at home? Our smart speaker picks let you say, play 70s reggae or classic pop, and you're there. Deal alert! If you use the link in the description, you'll land on our curated picks with current best available Amazon pricing and active discounts where applicable. Prices change, so buy now to lock in today's deal. Tap the link in the description, pick your aisle, grab a favorite, and tell me which category you want me to build next. The Lore Store. Listen better, with gear that gets out of the way and lets the music live.
They weren't just selling music, they were selling a way to live. For fans, Roots Reggae felt like permission. For the industry, it felt like a problem. Act 1, Detonation. In 1972, the fuse reached the powder. The Wailers signed with Island Records and walked into international studios like soldiers disguised as a band. Chris Blackwell didn't market them as a Caribbean novelty. He framed them like a rock act, serious jackets, album art with teeth, tours aimed straight at London and the U.S. The result, Catch a Fire 1973 and Burnin' 1973. Those weren't records. You could argue they were indictments. Get Up, Stand Up doesn't flirt. It commands. I Shot the Sheriff doesn't ask for sympathy. It reverses the gaze. Fans understood immediately. The bass felt like a spine. The drum, a heartbeat under pressure. The lyrics, calm and furious, and that calm fury spread. The first time some rock writers heard it, they sneered, too repetitive, too political, not real music. Meanwhile, in clubs and college halls, kids who had never set foot in Kingston stood frozen, then erupted because it didn't sound like a new act, it sounded like a verdict. This is where the myth engine switches on. The image wasn't a costume. Dreadlocks weren't fashion. They were refusal. Red, gold, green wasn't a palette. It was a passport. Knitted tams, army jackets, denim worn to the bone. Ital life preached in interviews and lived after sound check. The message reached beyond songs. Eat clean, think free, fight Babylon without asking its permission. To the faithful, it was oxygen. To the fearful, it looked like trouble arriving on time. Act 2. Controversy writes the script. The more direct the message, the louder the backlash. Rasta on wax meant police attention in the streets. Ganja as sacrament meant raids and headlines. Some stations clipped or refused songs that named Babylon too clearly. Peter Tosh turned the pressure into policy. Legalize it wasn't a slogan, it was a dare, and the pushback made him larger, not smaller. The Wailers themselves were no tabloid, tidy story, internal riffs, business arguments, the grind of being prophets, asked to tour like pop stars. And then, December 1976, gunmen entered Bob Marley's home days before the Smile Jamaica concert. Bullets flew. Marley, Rita, and their manager were wounded. 2 nights later, he limped on stage anyway, shirt open, bandaged, defiant. That's when myth overtook marketing. The world didn't just hear the rebel, they saw the cost. From that night forward, the image hardened. Marley as the unkillable messenger. Tosh as the uncompromising prosecutor. Bunny Wailer as the spiritual witness. Burning Spear as the historian priest. Marcus Garvey, 1975, teaching Pan-African memory on vinyl. Harmony groups like Culture tuned prophecy to a chorus. Their warning would crest a year later with 2/7's clash, a date that made everyday Jamaicans reconsider leaving their houses. Whether you believe the prophecy or not, you felt its weight. Critics versus fans. That tension sharpened the blade. The respectable press sniffed. Monotone, militant, mystical nonsense, too dirty, street music. The crowd answered with ticket stubs, rewound cassettes, and a new vocabulary. Babylon, I, Zion, Irie. The words migrated into dorm rooms and union halls, punk basements and youth clubs. If language shapes reality, Roots Reggae was busy redrafting the map. And the look traveled too. Dreads on kids who'd never met a Rasta. Army coats and gray English winters, red, gold, green stitched onto jackets in Bronx schoolyards, posters of the Lion of Judah beside Clash flyers. You could hear it in punk bass lines, in post-punk dub experiments, in Two Tones ska revival, in DJ Patter sliding into early hip-hop. The beat that began as local witness was now global grammar. Act 3, larger than life and larger than industry. The industry tried to bottle it, gloss the edges, sand the sermons, package the rebel for safe shelves, but Roots Reggae didn't behave. Studio magicians like Lee Scratch Perry built echo chambers where drums sounded like marching feet and voices came back from the future. Sound systems minted folk heroes without asking radio for a blessing. Coxsone Dodd's schools of players turned sessions into living textbooks. Each cut felt like another page in the same long book of survival labels. Loved the demand, hated the control it gave to the street. Governments loved the calm when the song soothed, hated the fire when the songs named names. Church elders loved the Bible language, hated how Rasta reread it with Africa at the center. And that contradiction, the world buying the poster while fearing the person, made the figures mythic. They weren't just performers, they were symbols that would not stay inside the frame. So by the end of 1976, Roots Reggae is at full spiritual and political power. The sound is slower, heavier, prophetic. The image is devotion as defiance. The scandals, raids, bans, bullets are proof the message is landing. The influence is everywhere. Punk, post-punk, two-tone, early hip-hop, and the vocabulary of resistance has a backbeat the world can chant. Resolution, but not relief. The explosion crowned heroes and painted targets on their backs. The music made millions feel seen and made powerful people feel seen too. Curiosity Gap, here's the contradiction we can't ignore. When the soundtrack of rebellion gets this loud, rebellion doesn't stay on records. In the next chapter, we step into the street, party guns, party politics, Kingston on edge, and the night music and power had a face-to-face that no lyric could soften. This is where the myth meets the muzzle. This is where the beat has to survive bullets. You don't build a myth for free. Everything we've talked about so far, the message, the defiance, the pride, it all had a cost. And by the mid to late 1970s, that cost started showing up in bodies, in passports, in hospital rooms, in police files. This is the part where the story stops being local. This is the part where the pressure inside Jamaica explodes outward. Act 1, Leaving Home. After the December 3rd, 1976 shooting at 56 Hope Road, when 7 gunmen came into Bob Marley's house and opened fire just days before the Smile Jamaica concert, it was clear that reggae had crossed a line. It was no longer just music caught in politics. It was now a direct target in that politics. Rita Marley was shot in the head. Bob was hit. The manager was hit. People almost died. And everyone in Kingston understood what that really meant. If you can shoot the face of the movement in his own home, nobody is untouchable. So after that, Marley did something that sounds simple, but emotionally, spiritually, was huge. He left. He spent long stretches away from Jamaica, especially in London, not just to heal physically, but to get out from under the political crossfire between the PNP and JLP. That had turned Kingston neighborhoods into armed zones. Those two rival parties had supporters and street crews fighting gun battles over territory and influence during the 1976 election crisis, and reggae artists were stuck in the middle of it, whether they wanted to be or not. This is the cost part people don't like to think about. The rebel icon everybody wanted to claim had to leave the place that made him. He had to make exile his new normal. He had to carry home in his throat because he couldn't stand safely in it. That's not freedom, that's survival. In London, in 1977, Bob Marley and the Wailers recorded the album Exodus. That record is not just another release in a catalog. It is a man in forced distance, processing pain, betrayal, longing, and destiny, and turning it all into scripture over groove. Exodus would go on to be called the best album of the 20th century by Time magazine in 1999. So stop and feel that. Reggae, which started as street testimony from the poorest blocks of Kingston, is now being called the defining album of an entire century by mainstream Western press. A voice from the ghetto is now sitting in the center of global culture. But the other side of that sentence is this: to get there, he had to run. That's the cost. Act 2, exporting the rebellion. Once reggae leaves Jamaica, something else happens. The fight doesn't fade. It mutates. London, Birmingham, Brixton, Coventry. The UK had a huge Caribbean immigrant population by the 1970s, especially from former British colonies like Jamaica. Jamaican sound system culture, dub plates, and yard-style MC talk didn't stay in those immigrant flats. They leaked into working-class British youth culture, right into punk and post-punk scenes. Listen to The Clash in the late 70s, that slower, heavy, bass-led skank showing up inside a punk band. That's not an accident. That's not experiment. That's absorption. British kids heard reggae and said, this is working-class anger with discipline. This is how you point at the government and name it. And look at Two Tone, The Specials, The Selector, Madness, The Beat. Late 70s, early 80s, Britain takes Jamaican ska, rocksteady, and reggae rhythm and fuses it with punk's edge and urgency. The result is a new sound built around racial unity, anti-racist politics, and working-class struggle in a collapsing industrial UK. That black and white checkerboard aesthetic, that rude boy suit and pork pie hat, that wasn't just style, that was code. It was saying black and white, same stage, black and white, same fight. Now understand what that means for reggae's legacy. Back in Jamaica, reggae was already seen as dangerous, immoral, too political, corrupting the youth. Overseas, in Britain, it became the blueprint for a mixed-race youth movement that refused to behave the way older Britain expected. The industry could not control that. They couldn't market it as just sunshine anymore, but there's another layer to the spread, and it's technical. Dub. If roots reggae is the sermon, dub is the surgery. Engineers like King Tubby in Jamaica started pulling apart finished tracks, dropping the vocals out, pushing the bass and drums forward, drowning the room in echo and reverb, slicing space into the mix like a weapon. He wasn't just mixing, he was performing on the board live, rebuilding the song in real time, making every version different. Dub did two huge things. First, it gave reggae this haunted cinematic weight, the feeling that you're standing in an alley at 3 a.m., hearing shouts bounce off zinc roofs and concrete. Second, it basically invented modern remix culture. The idea that a producer or DJ could take recorded material, recut it, strip it, echo it, and present it as a new experience. That's dub. That logic flows straight in to hip-hop DJ culture, into electronic dance music, into bass-heavy club production worldwide. So while Jamaica was tearing itself apart politically, Jamaican sound was quietly taking over the future. You feel that split? That's the cost, too. The people making it are under threat. The ideas they created are about to feed entire global scenes. Act 3, the world claims the sound. By the end of the 1970s, reggae is no longer contained. It's not just Kingston, it's London flats, it's Birmingham factories, it's New York block parties, it's Lagos nightclubs, it's Harare stadiums. On April 1980, Bob Marley and the Wailers played in Harare, Zimbabwe. At that country's independence celebration, a brand new African nation shaking off white minority rule and British colonial power. He wasn't booked as background entertainment. He was there because his music had already become part of that liberation story. His song, Zimbabwe, was embraced by activists before independence. Then he arrived and sang it on the ground as the flag was raised. Think about how far that is from a Kingston yard. In less than one generation, reggae traveled from homemade speakers wired in an empty lot to the first hours of a free country's birth ceremony. That is the moment the myth becomes international fact. And again, feel the human cost underneath that moment. To stand on that stage in Zimbabwe, Marley was already exhausted, already carrying serious health issues that would end his life within a year. He was still barely in his mid-30s. He had spent years on the run from politics, in non-stop recording, in relentless touring, in constant expectation to be the symbol, even when the symbol was in pain. You don't build a myth for free. Behind the posters, behind the shirts, behind the speeches about unity, there is a man who can't go home without risking more gunfire. A band trying to hold together under money stress and ego and politics. A movement that is now expected to speak for Jamaica, for the Caribbean, for black struggle in Britain, for African liberation, for world peace, all at once. Slow down and really sit with that. Because this is where people break. Reggae's spread to London, to punk clubs, to two-tone ska, to dub labs, to independent ceremonies in Africa. That wasn't just success. That was pressure. That was weight. That was responsibility at a global scale, placed on human beings who had already risked their lives just to record the message. And here's the painful truth under the victory. Exile made reggae global. But exile also started killing the people carrying it. Curiosity gap. What happens to the message once it's everywhere? Does it stay roots, spiritual, revolutionary, Rasta, anti-Babylon, or does it split, mutate, harden into something else? In the next chapter, we watch that split happen in real time. Drum machines come in, the tempo jumps, the DJ steps forward, and dancehall is born. This is where the sermon turns into the street report. This is where the next generation stops asking for permission at all. Most acts fade quietly. Roots reggae didn't fade. It crashed, scattered, and then reassembled itself into something new. Faster, louder, less patient, more dangerous in a different way. And that's why the legend of roots reggae froze in time, almost wholly, while the street kept moving without waiting for permission. Act way, the break. By the late 1970s, something was breaking. The first generation of roots voices, the preachers, the prophets, the revolution on vinyl generation had carried the weight. They had aimed their words at Babylon. They had stood up in a world that wanted them silent. Some were shot at, some were watched, some were pushed out of their own neighborhoods, some were simply exhausted. The spiritual fire of roots reggae was never fake. But you can only live in that level of spiritual emergency for so long before it eats you. On top of that, the business started pulling at them. The international market wanted reggae, but make it friendly. Labels wanted the rebel, but only the parts that sold posters. Governments wanted the message controlled. Street politics wanted the artists to stand with one side, then punish them for not choosing hard enough. Even inside the music, there were splits. Who controls the name? Who owns the master tapes? Who gets paid? Who gets left? So no, the movement didn't just evolve. It broke under pressure, and in the space where it cracked, something else rushed in. Because Jamaica doesn't wait. When one language burns out, the street invents a new language. Enter the next wave, the sound speeds up, the drums shift, the focus moves. And the center of gravity slides from the singer to the man on the mic right now. That is the birth of dancehall. Act 2, The Shift. Here's what changed musically. Roots reggae is band-driven, live drums, live bass, harmonies, often rooted in Rasta faith. The lyrics address oppression, Africa, identity, justice, Babylon. It feels like a sermon and a report at the same time. Then, in the late 70s into the early 80s, that frame loosens. The rhythm gets stripped down. The bass and drums become tighter, meaner, harder. Sometimes you're not even working with a full band anymore. You're working with a rhythm track built in the studio, repeated, versioned, recycled. You don't need lush harmony. You don't need a choir. You need one voice on the mic, riding that rhythm like a boxer rides the rope. That voice is the toaster. This is the era where the DJ, not radio DJ, but the man at the sound system with the live mic, steps into center stage. He's not singing in the traditional sense. He's talking, chanting, bragging, mocking, warning, storytelling, commanding the crowd in real time. His voice isn't floating above the beat. His voice is attacking the beat. That's dancehall. The drum machines and early digital textures start creeping in. The groove speeds up compared to roots. The feel is less spiritual chant and more street bulletin. The crowd doesn't sway and meditate. The crowd locks in and responds instantly. That immediacy is new. It's not write a song in 1979, release it in 1980, get reviewed in 1981. It's something happened on my block this week. We're cutting a version tonight. Hear me talk about it at the dance tomorrow. That speed is important because it shows you what really ended. It wasn't reggae. It was the idea that reggae had to go through a priest first and listen to what they're talking about. Roots reggae talked about Babylon, Africa, repatriation, dignity, spiritual war. Dancehall talks about garrison life, which housing block is safe and which is suicide. Police pressure, constant harassment, raids, beatdowns, poverty, not as a theory, but as this is how I hustled today. Sex openly, graphically, proudly. Respect in who has it, who doesn't, who got violated, who got revenge. Status, fashion, swagger, how you carry yourself when you have nothing but you still need to look like you have something. It's more personal, less apologetic, and because it's more personal, it sounds less political to outsiders, but that's a misunderstanding. Talking openly about surviving in a garrison is political. Talking openly about police is political. Talking openly about hunger, desperation, territory, protection, self-image, that's politics at street level. It's not myth, it's diary. Act 3, Yellowman, Cool Herc, and The Bridge. Now we need to say names. Yellowman, in the early 1980s, becomes one of the defining voices of this new style. He wasn't clean, he wasn't corporate, and he wasn't quiet. He was raw, funny, fast, sexual, fearless. He treated the mic like a weapon and a stage like a court. He didn't arrive as a soft evolution from Roots. He arrived like, I don't owe you the Roots playbook, I owe you today. For a lot of conservative ears, older ears, and foreign press, this was too much, too vulgar, too boastful, too slack. This isn't conscious anymore. This isn't spiritual anymore. This isn't proper reggae. But for the youth in Jamaica, it was like air. Why? Because he was saying what they were actually living, with no filter, no sermon, no middleman. He was proof that you didn't have to be chosen by a label, blessed by Rasta elders, or approved by a politician to speak for the bloc. You could crown yourself. That's a full power shift, and that shift doesn't just stay in Jamaica. There's a kid from Jamaica named Clive Campbell. The Bronx will come to know him as DJ Cool Herc. He brings the Jamaican sound system mindset, big speakers, live mic energy, talking over the music into New York block parties in the 1970s. He isolates the break, the drum and bass part of a record, and keeps extending it so dancers can go off. That becomes one of the building moves of hip-hop. The idea that the DJ controls the energy, that the crowd answers back, that the voice on the mic hypes, calls out, names reality in real time. That's straight out of Jamaican sound system DNA, so reggae doesn't die. Reggae mutates into dancehall, and dancehall flows straight into the birth of hip-hop. That's not retirement, that's reproduction. Now let's come back to the emotional question. Was this the end? Kind of. This is the moment where a lot of people who fell in love with roots reggae, the holy, heavy, Rasta-saturated, Babylon-calling, Africa-pointing roots era, say, after this, it wasn't the same. And that's true, because after this, it wasn't the same. The prophet on stage moment, the image of the calm revolutionary in a head wrap chanting down Babylon with a harmony trio behind him, that era becomes frozen in memory. It becomes sacred. It becomes legend. Why? Because once dancehall takes over, the center of the story moves from free the people to this is my life, take it or leave it. And some people could not go with that shift. Some couldn't handle the speed. Some couldn't handle the dirt. Some couldn't survive long enough to adapt. That's the break. Most genres fade out quietly. Roots reggae did not. It didn't slowly go irrelevant. It didn't get politely retired. It detonated under pressure, bullets, exile, exhaustion. And what came after wasn't a softer version. It was a harder street form with new rules, so the old form stayed locked in time. The first wave of roots reggae got sealed in amber as the truth, the real, the message, the pure era. It became myth. It became untouchable. It became a reference point for revolution worldwide. And that's exactly why it never got to grow old and safe. Curiosity gap, but here's the question we have to ask now. When the prophet voice steps off the mic and the street voice takes over and zoy shit, does the mission survive? In the next chapter, we go into that fight. Who tried to control the message? Who tried to soften it? Who tried to sell it back to the world as peace and love? And who refused to let it be turned into a souvenir? Because if Babylon couldn't kill the sound in Kingston, maybe Babylon tried to buy it. Before roots reggae, rebel music was mostly local, street resistance, protest chants, folk struggle. After roots reggae, the sound of rebellion had a bass line. Even if you've never owned a reggae record, you are living in its echo. Phew, the world tried to take the sound. Let's be honest, once reggae went global, everybody wanted a piece of it. Governments wanted to control it. Labels wanted to sell it. People wanted to soften it. That alone tells you how powerful it was, because reggae wasn't just cool New Island music. Reggae was the voice of the underclass recorded. It was the poor describing the rich. It was the policed describing the police. It was the colonized speaking back to empire by name. That scared people. In Jamaica in the 1970s, songs that were seen as too explosive, too anti-government, too openly Rasta, too willing to call out Babylon, could get banned or quietly blocked from airplay, supposedly for security reasons. Radio could say, "We can't play this. It might incite violence." Convenient, right? That same excuse shows up in every era. The people in charge call your truth dangerous and then act like they're protecting you by muting you. Meanwhile, the international machine was doing the opposite kind of damage. Major labels and global media looked at reggae and said, "Yes, we can sell this, but not like that. Too many guns in the lyrics. Cut that. Too much Rasta theology, Africa talk, reparations talk. Dial that down. Too much Babylon is corrupt." Reframe it as, "Let's all love each other." They start pushing one face, one name, one simplified message: peace, love, unity, good vibes. And the world said, "Yes, that's reggae." That is both true and not true, because here's the split. Bob Marley absolutely preached unity, healing, and global togetherness. That part is real. That part is beautiful. That part is why you hear "One Love" at weddings. But that's not the full truth of who he was or what he said. The man who sang "One Love" is also the man who sang "Get Up, Stand Up." The man who smiled on posters is also the man who warned about mental slavery, political manipulation, and spiritual war. He wasn't only selling peace, he was selling self-defense. He was selling self-worth. He was selling confrontation with systems that benefit from you giving up. When you take that and edit it down to good vibes only, you aren't spreading the message, you're declawing it. And this is the question reggae forces us to ask. Did the world fall in love with the beat, but turn down the warning? Act 2, when a sound becomes a language. Now let's talk legacy in real terms. Reggae didn't just influence other artists. Reggae rewired entire genres. Start with punk. In late 70s Britain, punk bands like The Clash weren't just fans of reggae, they were students of it. They copied the bass-forward drum and space feel. They copied the idea that music could openly attack government and police and class structure. They copied the stance: "We are not here to entertain your comfort, we are here to accuse your comfort." That's reggae DNA. Then go to hip-hop. DJ Kool Herc, a Jamaican immigrant, carried sound system logic from Kingston to the Bronx. The blueprint of hip-hop party culture comes straight out of that world. Massive speakers, DJ control, live toasting on the mic, calling out real conditions in real time. The idea that the city's truth belongs to the people on the mic, not to the newspaper. That's straight from reggae's street function. That's reggae DNA. Now look at bass culture and electronic music. Dub, that's studio science where engineers like King Tubby and Lee Scratch Perry stripped out vocals, carved giant holes in the mix, blasted echo, and let the bass speak like a prophet. That approach becomes the foundation of remix culture. It leads into club music, into electronic offshoots, into jungle, drum and bass. Dubstep, modern sound design, the idea that the producer is not just an engineer, but an author, a voice, a star. Reggae helped write that rule. That's reggae DNA, and we're not done. Afrofusion, Afrobeats, Caribbean dancehall, Latin sounds like reggaeton. All of that comes from this same tree. Heavy drum and bass focus, repeated rhythms, voice on top as weapon, lyrics about survival and status and identity, not filtered for respectability. The way global pop now treats rhythm first, message second, that's reggae's fingerprint on the modern world. Even if you never press play on a roots reggae track, you're already listening to its grandchildren, and culturally, the image traveled too. Dreadlocks, once labeled criminal, dirty, cult, became respected, then iconic. Rasta colors, red, gold, green, moved from band spaces to college dorm walls to football stadium flags to protest marches. Phrases like Babylon, I and I, One Love, Erie, crossed oceans and stayed. People who never lived in Kingston, never read Rastafari texts, now speak using words Rastas forged under police pressure. That's legacy you cannot measure on a chart. That's language takeover. It got to the point where young activists in places far from Jamaica, black youth in Britain, anti-apartheid supporters in Southern Africa, working-class kids in American cities saw reggae artists not just as musicians, but as proof of possibility, proof that someone from a small, poor, heavily policed community could speak so loudly that whole nations had to answer. Reggae turned local survival into exportable courage. That is why murals go up. That is why bootlegs circulate forever. That is why every few years there's another documentary, another reissue, another tribute show, another box set. It's not nostalgia, it's maintenance. Act 3, the price of being a symbol. But legacy isn't clean. There's a dark side to being turned into a symbol. Once the world decided what reggae means, the world started editing reggae to protect itself. Governments that once sent riot police into Rasta neighborhoods now hold cultural appreciation events and quote lyrics about unity, while still not always answering the lyrics about inequality and corruption. Corporations that once wouldn't touch a militant, dreadlocked artist now sell his face on shirts, lunchboxes, headphones, rolling papers. Love and rebellion got packaged together until you barely notice there used to be a line between them, and the message gets rewritten. You hear One Love and think peace, unity, good feeling. But listen again, One Love is not passive. One Love is a demand. Let's get together and feel all right under justice, under truth, under equality. It is a conditional hope, not a blind smile. The global market likes the smile. It does not always repeat the condition, and that's where the myth lives. Resolution. Legacy means two things at once. On one hand, reggae conquered the world. It changed how music is mixed, how bass is used, how protest sounds, how the poor speak back. It opened the door for punk fury, hip-hop truth-telling, dub science, dancehall swagger, and every modern scene where a microphone is used like a weapon instead of a decoration. On the other hand, to make reggae safe for mass consumption, the world tried to declaw it, to pretend it was only love, only good energy, only, don't worry, that's the fight that never ended. Curiosity gap. So we're left with one uncomfortable question. Did the world fall in love with reggae's rhythm and ignore its warning? In the final chapter, we answer that because the story doesn't end with fame or with a poster or even with death. The story ends with what reggae leaves behind, a blueprint for resistance, a way to name Babylon out loud, and a challenge to anyone who claims to love the culture. Are you dancing to it or are you carrying it?
All right, C-Trends fam, let's keep it real. We're pouring our hearts into bringing you the best celebrity news and music deep dives. What? Check it. A massive 98% of you aren't subscribed yet. Subscribing is how you can truly support us, helping us grow and create even better content. If you're vibing with what we do, take a sec to hit that subscribe button. It's free and makes a huge difference. Plus, ring that notification bell so you never miss out. Let's flip that 98% and build this C Trends family together. Your support is everything.
If you were there back then, you already know the truth. You remember how the bass felt like a heartbeat. You remember how the first time you heard Babylon on a record, it felt illegal. You remember how a song didn't just make you dance, it made you stand up straighter. And if you weren't there, now you do. What this music really did, roots reggae, was never just sound, it was access. It took people who had no platform, poor, black, watched, profiled, controlled, and it gave them a global microphone. It made the suffering of one block in Kingston understandable to a kid in London, to a miner in Birmingham, to an activist in Zimbabwe, to a teenager in the Bronx who couldn't get his story on any radio station. It said, "We are here, we are not quiet, and we answer to no empire. That doesn't go away." You can still hear it right now, today, anytime someone uses heavy bass like a narrator, anytime someone calls out police or government by name, anytime someone stands on a stage and speaks for the people who never get invited to the table. That is reggae's DNA still moving through the body of modern music. Hip-hop took it, dancehall took it, Afrobeats took it, reggaeton took it, even conscious trap, protest grime, militant street poetry, that voice is still carrying the same charge. This is the proof that the story doesn't end. It just keeps changing narrators, and the language survived too. Think about it. Babylon is now worldwide slang for corrupt systems, abuse of authority, predatory power. Zion is still used to mean freedom, safety, return, self-rule. One love is still how people talk to each other when they're trying to say, "I see you, you're one of mine." Those aren't just words, those are tools. Roots reggae didn't just leave songs behind, it left vocabulary behind. Act 2, your memory is part of this. Now I want to slow this all the way down because here's the part we almost never say out loud. None of this is guaranteed to survive. The algorithm wants you to forget. The market wants to sell you the poster without the politics. History gets sanitized, softened, edited for comfort. That's how movements die, not by being erased in one day, but by being repackaged until they're harmless. Which is why you matter here, right now, as you're watching this. Because the real archive is not just in museums or box sets. The real archive is in people who still remember what it felt like. So I'm going to ask you directly, what was the first reggae song that hit you in the chest? Not the first song you heard, the first one that made you stop what you were doing and really listen. Was it a roots record? Something heavy? Warning you about Babylon? Talking about struggle like it was happening on your street, even if it wasn't? Or was it early dancehall and raw, personal, fast, like someone telling you the news of the block with no filter? Which era speaks to you more, the classic roots resistance or the early dancehall truth? And tell me this too, who from that era deserves a full deep dive next on this channel? Peter Tosh and that fearless confrontational voice, burning spear carrying African memory like scripture, culture, turning prophecy into harmonies that felt like a warning and a prayer at the same time, or someone the mainstream never gave the mic to, someone only you remember? Say their name in the comments. Write it like you're putting it into the record, because you are. When you do that, you're not leaving a comment, you're preserving a piece of history that the mainstream might never bother to write down. Act 3, this doesn't end here. Here's the last thing I'll leave you with. Reggae proves something that powerful people still don't like. If you can teach people how to name what's hurting them, you can't control them the same way. Once you know the word Babylon, you start to see Babylon in real life. Once you hear get up, stand up, you stop believing that silence is safety. Once you understand that someone from nothing can speak to the whole world, you understand that the whole world is not owned by the people who think they own it. That is the real legacy, and that is why, even now, decades later, governments still fear music that talks too direct. Corporations still try to rebrand struggle as vibes, and every generation still has to fight to keep its voice unedited. So here's how we keep it alive. We tell it, we argue about it, we correct each other, we remember the names, we pass it forward, and we don't let Babylon rewrite it for us. This is Reggae Topics. We document the sound of rebellion so it doesn't get erased. Before you go, drop the first song that ever made you believe this music was more than music. Call the next artist we should break down. And subscribe, not just to support the channel, but so this story keeps being told to the next person who was never supposed to hear it. Because this doesn't stop with this video. We're not done. We're just getting started.